Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Focal Bathys MG. This is the follow-up from the original Focal Bathys, which was Focal's sort of first entry into the wireless noise canceling world. And this is not just a new colorway for the Bathys platform. This is an entirely different thing. It's certainly a lot more expensive, but the question is it actually better? Well, in today's video, that's what we're going to find out. So let's get going. Okay, so where is this unit from? This is a demo unit provided by Focal for review. Big thanks to Focal for sending it in for me to check out. Of course, I haven't been paid to say anything in particular about it, and all thoughts and opinions here are my own. Okay, let's get right into the review here, and the first thing you guys are going to notice is that the new Bathys MG looks similar, but also different. It has this new aesthetic to it in terms of its color scheme for, the cups, the yokes, the sort of external structure to it, and the headband as well, and also the pads. But as far as the rest of the mechanical and industrial design is concerned here, this is basically the same. Now, I've kind of been going back and forth as to which one I like the look of better. There is something visually striking or more striking about this new bronze and brown color scheme that they have going on here. But the big difference here that most folks will notice right away is that the pad deformation, the pad compliance, is very different between the two headphones. So with the original Bathys, it was already quite compliant for the pads. But with the new one, it's extremely compliant, like just the tiniest little bit of force and it'll completely depress the pads. And this does have an impact on both the sound and the comfort. Imagine you have the softest and most supple feeling things in the world gently pressing into the side of your head and caressing the side of your ears. It's a nice feeling. I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. But one slight downside with the more compliant pad design is that because the pads compress and deform more easily, the backside of my pinna does touch the inside of the baffle just ever so slightly on the Bathys MG, while it doesn't on the original Bathys, because the pads are a little bit stiffer here. They're still very compliant, but they're not quite as compliant. So yeah, I do this and my ear doesn't touch the inside of the baffle with this one at all. So if you have large ears, or if you're really sensitive to the backside of your pinna touching the inside of the baffle, that is something to consider. I will note though, relative to the competition, for the vast majority of ANC headphones, my ear also touches the inside of the baffle, and you do get much larger pad openings with this platform here than most ANC headphones. So it doesn't feel like an on-ear headphone, it actually feels like a proper over-ear headphone. So for overall comfort, I would say this is very, very good, but just keep in mind that one little scrungle about the backside of the pinna touching the inside of the baffle if you have large ears. Just keep that in mind. One other nice thing about the increased pad compliance here is that it is going to have a little bit of an easier time creating a seal for people who wear glasses, and conforming around any weird contours that people might have to the side of the head. While this doesn't mean that it's going to be more consistent across the entire spectrum, certainly when it comes to the seal integrity, it is likely to be more consistent on the Bathys MG, and that's also a good thing. Now, one criticism that I have of both of these is that I wish the top headband strap could be just a little bit wider to distribute the weight a little bit better. But for folks with smaller heads, I'm going to recommend checking out the Capra strap. That's something that works for some of their other headphones that have this kind of design, like the Azuris and the Hedenis. For larger heads, that won't work at all. Like for my head, that strap doesn't fit. But for the headlets out there who are hoping to wear these all day, that might be something worth checking out. Now, let's get into the sound quality. But just before I do, I want to give a big shout out to Headphones.com, who makes all of these videos possible. For folks who are unaware, Headphones.com is the place to learn about and buy headphones. It's where you can learn about things like diffuse field or the head-related transfer function. But also, they have an absolutely ridiculous 365-day return policy. Rather than being just another audio store, they wanted to be a resource for the community, making Headphones.com a place that people could buy headphones, knowing that they would get something they would like at the end of the day without being locked into a purchase that didn't fit with their preferences. And if you find anything that we do on this channel here useful or valuable to you in some way, please support us by checking out Headphones.com for your next audio purchase. So how does the Bathys MG sound? And there was their earlier release of the Clear MG versus the original Clear, and some of us liked the original Clear better, some liked the new Clear better. I was in the camp that preferred the original. With these two, with the Bathys MG, I'm pretty sure that just about everybody is going to prefer the Bathys MG over the original Bathys. It's just straightforwardly better than the original. It is smoother throughout the mid-range. It's a more balanced sound overall. They fixed some of the frequency response related quirks with the original Bathys, making it overall just a much more cohesive and versatile experience. And I'm going to get into the nerd shit here in a moment because there's some interesting things going on with this platform. But first, the general sound signature here for the Bathys MG is a warm, rich, euphonic kind of presentation that is highly detailed, while at the same time being a little bit on the thick side of things, particularly to do with a forward character in the lower mid-range. When I'm listening to anything that has piano tones or any recordings that have acoustic guitars, instrumental music of any kind, and also certain vocal music as well, I'm specifically thinking of the James Blake recordings like Retrograde. The mid-range here is absolutely incredible and a meaningful step up over the original Bathys. The original could occasionally come across a little bit on the honky or glary side of things, depending on the recording that you were listening to, because it does have some additional quirks and colorations throughout the mid-range. That's entirely gone with the Bathys MG. Now the bass here is elevated. It's full, rich, not quite as elevated in the sub bass as the original Bathys, but the extra compliance to the pads is likely going to make that bass response a little bit more consistent. But overall, the bass profile here is pretty similar. My main criticism of both of these headphones has to do with the transition between the bass and the lower mids. I think it is a little bit too far forward on both of them. It tends to walk that line a little bit for me between thick and boomy. And it's not quite that kind of tight and tactile bass that I usually prefer. However, with that said, this is also very dynamically intense. It's very impactful. It's this sort of flaring effect that when it works, it really works. But that doesn't mean it always does. I'm thinking of times when I'm listening to my jazz music that has, the upright double bass going on. That tone can sound a little bit swollen on these headphones, or a little bit emphasized for that sort of like richness that's coming through. Other times it's totally innocuous and I don't notice it at all. So it's a little bit music dependent when it comes to that region in particular. But overall, this is a very intense kind of sound. There's a general intimacy going on with these headphones that has a tendency to kind of slam those details down your throat a little bit, or into your ear holes a little bit. That, for people looking for that, super, effortless soundstage kind of thing, that's not really what I get with these headphones. On top of that, the treble performance here is quite good, mostly. It's very clear sounding for the treble, but there's also a little bit of that sort of punctuation and sharpness that exists in the mid treble right at around 8 kilohertz. I'm not going to say that this is sibilant, it's just that there's a sharpness to the S's, F's, and T's, and it does balance out some of the warmth that's going on with the rest of the tuning, but it's just something to be aware of. Now, that's just how it sounds to me subjectively, and that's also just with the default sound profile that it has. It also has a dynamic mode, and that's very interesting with this headphone. This completely cleans up that lower mid-range forwardness, giving it essentially a Harman-like profile. But I want to get into that when we talk about the measurements, so let's do that now. So I'm showing you guys here the measurements done on the B&K 5-28. There's a reason why I'm focusing on this system for ANC headphones. We don't need to get into that in this video, but with the default sound signature that you get here, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You can see that the Bathys MG is similar to the original Bathys in that it has that forward lower mid-range character. But importantly, that dip at around 900 Hz that existed on the original Bathys is gone. And I think one of the key criticisms of the original Bathys was that there was a forward presentation at around 1 to 1.5 kilohertz, 1.2, 1.3 kilohertz. And that effect could sound occasionally a bit honky, a bit glary on the original Bathys as a result of the 900 Hz dip kind of exacerbating that problem. With the new one, with the Bathys MG, they've dealt with this problem for the most part. Now, it's still slightly forward there, again, subjectively, when I listen to this. And the reason for that is this is where the positional variation goes quite wide with this headphone. The positional consistency for the Bathys MG basically ends at around 1 kilohertz. So if I move over to the raw graphs here, you can see all the rest of the positional variation for this headphone. So depending on how it sits on the head and how it couples, you may get one of these other results. You may get a result that is more forward in that mid-range band at around 1.5 kilohertz, or you might get one where it's less, right? So it all kind of depends on how it's being worn, how it sits on the head. And this is kind of true for the competition as well. For most wireless noise canceling headphones, the variation gets quite extreme the higher up in frequency you go. But it seems that Focal is aware of this, and they've tried to address this problem by kind of reducing this whole section in the frequency response for the Bathys MG, meaning that for anybody where it is a little bit more forward there at 1.5 kilohertz or 1.3 kilohertz, it's not going to come across as fatiguing. It's not going to come across as glary or honky or lean or anything like that, because that whole section is now pulled back a little bit. So this takes a little bit of nuance to understand, because the variability problem still exists with this headphone the way it did on the original Bathys. It's just now the worst end of that variability has been accommodated by the tuning on the Bathys MG. However, with that said, once again, that is just the default presentation for this headphone. But now let's move over to the dynamic mode. And this is where things get really interesting with this headphone, because this is one of the better measuring noise canceling headphones that I have seen, period. At least with respect to anybody wanting something to sound kind of like Harman, right? A Harman-like or Harman-adjacent kind of sound profile. The dynamic mode was meant to be Focal's kind of emulation of that sound signature. And with the original Bathys, it got kind of close, but remember that the original had that dip at around 900 hertz, and it had some of those more fine-grained quirks that were harder to accommodate. With the Bathys MG, because the whole thing is just smoother and more linear overall, it's much easier for them to achieve this more Harman-like tuning. And I feel like this is the kind of sound profile that a lot of people are going to like. Like for these types of headphones, I've been trying to think about a headphone that does this better, and I'm struggling. So while not everybody is going to prefer the dynamic mode over the default preset, for anybody looking for that Harman-like sound signature in a high-end noise-canceling headphone, this is one of the best, and I would recommend it for that purpose. So it's not just that the Bathys MG is better than the original Bathys for its default sound profile, it's that both sound profiles, the default and the dynamic mode, have been leveled up as a result of the changes to the acoustics going on with the Bathys MG, which is nice to see. Now, one thing I wanted to see here was how much of an effect the pads had on this overall tuning improvement. And so I took the Bathys MG pads and I put them on the original Bathys to see how that would measure. It's not a good idea. I don't recommend trying that. So this isn't just a matter of the pads changing the sound. There's a very deliberate and intentional tuning change to this headphone and this headphone's platform in that range, where I think the biggest problem areas for this headphone were for people. Now let's talk about some of the other improvements here. So they have claimed to have better ANC performance with the Bathys MG, and that's true. It does perform well, I would say. Here you can see the ANC performance overall, and here you can see it relative to a class leader like the Bose QC Ultra. What's interesting about this is that you can see it actually has more attenuation in certain places, so in the bass and in the treble, but the Bose QC Ultra still has better attenuation in the kind of lower mid-range band, which is probably the area that you would want attenuation in the most. But it has to be said that this is still a decent performance overall for this headphone. You know, it's not a class leader, but it's still solid. Now, one criticism that I had of the original Bathys is that because it's a little bit heavier than other ANC headphones, when you actually wear these headphones, they tend to move around a little bit when you're walking. So the physical movement of a step can cause the headphones to kind of, go up and down a little bit. And this does have an effect on the ANC consistency. And I know not everybody gets this, but I'm also not the only one to report this. So that is still one area where I think they could improve. Yes, the pads are nice and compliant and it feels great on the head and it's very comfortable, but when you're actually walking around outside with it, that ANC inconsistency can be annoying. When you're sitting stationary, like if you're on a bus or on a plane or something like that, no problems whatsoever with the ANC. I actually think this is pretty good. Now, one of the other improvements that they talk about is better Bluetooth with Bluetooth 5.2, and this is supposed to enable multi-point. This does technically work, but I feel like there might be some bugs still to iron out. They could, of course, release a firmware update, but as of filming this right now, I find that the multi-point only works in one direction with my devices at least. So let's say that I'm listening to this connected to my phone and I'm enjoying it throughout the day, and then I want to switch over to my computer. It'll do that. I'm able to hit play on my computer and it'll switch over to that. But then if I want to switch back to my phone, I have to first fully disconnect it from my computer before it'll start playing again on my phone. And maybe this is something that they can improve with a firmware update, but as of right now, it is not quite as good as multi-point is on other devices that I've tested with my same setup. And apart from that, you do still have the Focal and Name app with the same filters, so you can adjust this in various different ways. I do wish that you had more customizability here. Like I wish you had a filter at like 300 hertz and 1.5 kilohertz. You have filters that are kind of close to those ranges, but they're not quite where I want them. So maybe in the future, that's something that they can update to give folks more customizability options. So that's basically the Focal Bathys MG. So I'll give you guys a bit of a conclusion here as to how I think this product fits within the landscape of high-end or ultra high-end noise canceling headphones. Because remember, this is very expensive. That's actually my least favorite thing about this product is the price. Like, it's better than the Bathys, like unequivocally better, but it's also similar enough to the regular Bathys that I don't know that it fully justifies that much of a price increase. Like, I wish that it was only like a little bit more expensive, right? Like, that would make me feel a bit better about it. But if we basically ignore the price tag and just consider like goodness of product, this is one of the best noise canceling headphones that I have had the experience of using. And I did that tier list, a while ago where I put the original Bathys in B tier overall for like overall kind of like goodness of product, because it had a couple of quirks, particularly that variability problem and some of the issues people had with the mid-range. The Bathys MG has fixed those issues and just sort of leveled up this platform to the point where this is easily in A tier. Like, this is easily one of the best ANC headphones that I can think of right now, especially given what you get with this as far as, having two sound profiles, one with Focal's default sound profile if you want their kind of sound signature here, but one that just does a great job of nailing that Harman-like or Harman-adjacent kind of sound signature that we know people like. So I think they've done an incredible job with the sound quality on this headphone, and they've also, improved on some of the other aspects to do with it, like, for example, its noise canceling and its Bluetooth connectivity. I still think that the price tag for this one is a little bit aggressive, given that it is the same platform, kind of, as the original Bathys, despite its improvements. And I just wish that this were a little bit less expensive so that more people could get a chance to try this headphone out, so that it could be attainable for more people. But if you have lots of money and you want to get one of the best noise canceling headphones on the market, this is easily one of them. And probably the one that I would get, in the ultra high end over just about everything else that I can think of right now. But that does it for this video. Once again, if you're interested in all the measurements that we've done for this headphone, including some of the pad swaps that I've been doing here, the default pads are just better. Let's just stick with the default pads for both headphones. If you're interested in that, though, check out the forum thread linked in the description where I've posted all of that stuff, and other folks are chiming in as well. And if you want to chat with me or other like-minded people, you can do so in our Discord, also linked below. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.